Caulfield.
Ms Stokes, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I start by thanking my honourable friend and neighbour from Eastbourne for securing this debate. As luck would have it, I met with my farmers on Friday morning, with some of my farmers with the NFU over a bacon sandwich and some tea, and discussed many of the issues that she's raised. But there's 4 key areas that I really want to raise with the Minister this afternoon. The first is the cost of food production, and he will know only too well as a farmer himself, but the particular cost around fertilisers at the moment. The AHDB have estimated there's been a 152% increase in the cost of fertiliser since May 2021, and farmers are struggling to afford it. And that has a knock-on effect on the cost of the food that they're producing, the cost of the food in our supermarkets, and the overall cost of inflation, which is affecting each and every one of us at the moment. And if farmers can afford fertiliser, the struggle to get any seems to be even greater. We only produce about 40% of our own fertiliser domestically, and we had 2 plants that were producing those, one of which has closed, again due to running costs and the costs of energy. And there's a real concern because some countries that were exporting to us have capped exports because to bring costs down in their own countries, but also because of the availability globally. So the access to fertiliser is a huge, huge problem. And I know the government has brought in the BPS payments in several chunks to improve cash flow, and they've also reduced some of the restrictions around the use of manure, which has helped, but it's only just touching the top really of the problem. The 2 key asks really from farmers are to grow our domestic supply of fertiliser, and I just asked the Minister what discussions have been had with ministers in other departments to help to support the fertiliser sector so we can raise that to being more self-sufficient as a country. And the second ask is around the storage of slurry. It's very difficult, very expensive for farmers to do. Some of the regulations around slurry covers mean it's very impractical to do as well. They are very keen to be able to do that, but some of the rules and regulations and support to be able to increase storage would help them greatly. The second concern that was raised is around elms, and I echo what my honourable friend from Eastbourne has said. A survey by the NFU said around 84% of farmers are quite keen to take part in elms, but there's only, I think, 2 parts of the scheme that are open, and they have also mentioned the access to SFI, which is difficult. Of course, we want to protect and promote the environment, but we crucially need to increase food production and be self-sufficient in this country as much as possible. The 2 don't need to be mutually exclusive. Farmers are very keen to get involved, but there's no timelines, there's no details, and they really need, as the Minister will know himself, that certainty before investing in equipment, in staff, and the forward-thinking plans they need for 1 or 2 years in advance, and time is running out for that. The third area that they raised with me is around labour. Now, I met with dairy farmers, poultry farmers, arable farmers, who all said the same thing. They need all year-round supply of staff, not just seasonal workers. And their 2 key asks there are to expand the temporary worker visa to 2 years, and also to look at whether agricultural workers could be on the shortage of occupation list. And again, just to ask the Minister what discussions there's been with the Home Office around this, because that is, particularly in the South East, where the cost of living is high, finding those workers who do quite low paid but very difficult jobs is quite difficult for farmers to find. My fourth and final ask really is around avian flu. It's a huge problem for us in Sussex. It's starting to emerge thanks to West Sussex and maybe affecting my East Sussex poultry farmers fairly soon. But the sheer scale of the problem is something that's never been seen before by poultry farmers in this country. They're used to seasonal avian flu, locking up the chickens if they're free range and taking the measures in place. But we are seeing the inspectors are so overworked at the moment that the compensation scheme is based on the amount of birds you have left when the inspector comes to call, as they say. The inspectors who used to be able to visit maybe 48, 72 hours after a call are now turning up maybe 2-3 weeks later and all the birds are dead. And we're not talking about a few dozen here, we're talking hundreds of thousands. And farmers are going out of business. And the clean-up scheme, if you have avian flu, is in the millions. It's not in the hundreds of thousands. So it's, you know, I think with all that's going on in the world at the moment, it doesn't seem to be very high on the radar, but it is wiping out the egg industry in my patch. And my poultry farmers that are left could sell their eggs hundreds of times over. There is such a shortage. But if they get infected, they're wiped out and there's no coming back because of the cost. So could we have a look at the compensation scheme, or at least supporting the assessors so they can get out to farmers as quickly as possible and look at supporting them across their whole flock rather than the number of birds that are still alive by the time that they get to see them? And also around a vaccine rollout. I'm not an expert in this, but apparently there is a vaccine available, and they are keen, even if there's pilot studies to be done, they are keen to get involved because they are so worried about avian flu hitting their farms. So they're the 4 key areas. I really look forward to hearing from the Minister about how we can support our farmers. They do an amazing job. We've seen what's happened to Ukraine, which was the breadbasket of Europe. I think we appreciate more than ever the hard work of our farmers who get up early, work into the night, are so dependent on the weather for their living that sometimes they put in all the hours, and if they get a bad season, it hits them really badly. I just want to place on record my thanks to them and hope that we can support them in all they do.